A cold, gray morning in New York City. The incessant sound of car horns echoes through the busy streets of Brooklyn, where traffic never stops. Ethan Parker's apartment in the heart of the neighborhood is small and chaotic. Piles of crumpled clothes on the couch, dishes stacked in the sink, and a table covered with overdue bills and scattered papers. The alarm vibrates violently on Ethan's phone, buried somewhere under the covers on his mattress. He wakes with a start, heart pounding, desperately searching for his phone. Damn, he mutters. On the phone screen, the time, 8:45 a.m. A reminder flashes. Team meeting 9 o'clock. Ethan runs a frustrated hand through his messy hair. How did this happen again? I set the alarm, didn't I? He jumps out of bed, trips over a stack of books, and knocks an empty glass to the floor. His mind is already racing, trying to piece thoughts together. Pant. Report. Where's the key? As he rummages through the apartment, he finds a wrinkled dress shirt and throws on whatever jeans are closest. Grabbing his laptop in a rush, he sends half the papers flying to the floor. The car keys, under a pile of bills. In the elevator descending to the street, Ethan checks his phone again. Messages from his girlfriend, Rachel, flash on the screen. You forgot your lunch in the fridge again. This has to change, Ethan. He exhales sharply, irritated with himself. She's right. Everyone's right. I'm a mess. On the street, Ethan raises his arm, trying to hail a yellow cab. They all pass him by, already full of passengers. He runs toward the subway, rushing down the stairs as the crowd pushes around him. At the station, the electronic board flashes. Next train in 3 minutes. The environment is chaos. Quick footsteps, hurried voices, muffled announcements over the speakers. Ethan leans against the wall, trying to catch his breath. It'll be fine. Maybe I'll only be 10 minutes late. That's not so bad, right? When the train arrives, Ethan squeezes into the crowded car, clutching his backpack tightly. Around him, people stare at their phones, oblivious to his nervousness. Deep down, he feels that familiar weight, the weight of never measuring up. By the time Ethan reaches the Manhattan office building, it's already 9:32. He runs upstairs, cold sweat on his forehead. Opening the meeting room door, all eyes turn to him. His boss, Mr. Collins, pauses the presentation and crosses his arms. Glad you decided to show up, Ethan. I'm sorry, the subway. Ethan tries to explain, his voice hesitant. Mr. Collins sighs in frustration. It's always the subway, always the traffic. There's always an excuse, isn't there? We were counting on you today, but once again you let the team down. Ethan drops his gaze as his colleagues exchange uncomfortable looks. Every word from his boss feels like a blow. The truth is, you're talented, Ethan. But talent means nothing without responsibility. Ethan barely hears the rest. The sound of voices becomes muffled as he thinks. They're right. This is who I am. I'll never be able to change. That night, Ethan goes to his parents' house in Queens. The home is organized and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of his own life. Seated at the table, dinner is tense. His father, Robert Parker, a man with a firm voice and critical gaze, watches Ethan for a few seconds before speaking. How's work, Ethan? It's going, he responds, pushing food around his plate without looking up. Going? Robert frowns. That's not an answer, Ethan. You're 28. It's time to take things seriously. Ethan lifts his eyes, already expecting this. I'm trying, Dad. Robert sets his silverware down on the plate, the noise echoing through the room. You always say that, but trying doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't get you anywhere in this city. New York demands more than excuses. Helen, his mother, intervenes gently. Robert, there's no need to talk like that. But Ethan already feels his face burning with frustration. Do you think it's easy? He explodes, his voice trembling. Do you think I choose to be this way? Since I was a kid, you've only seen my mistakes. Nothing I ever do is good enough for you. Robert's expression hardens as he replies, because you never finish anything, Ethan. You've never taken anything seriously in your life. The silence at the table is deafening. Ethan abruptly stands, knocking the chair over. I shouldn't have come. He grabs his coat and leaves without looking back, his mother worried, his father staring at the plate, unmoving. Back in his Brooklyn apartment, Ethan steps inside and shuts the door behind him. He looks around. The piles of clothes, the dirty dishes, the unpaid bills. Everything seems to scream what he feels inside: failure. He collapses onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. Silent tears begin to fall as his mind is filled with the voices from the day. You never finish anything. You disappoint everyone. Why can't you be like everyone else? His phone buzzes beside him. A message from Rachel. Ethan, I don't know how much longer I can deal with this. You need help. He stares at the screen, feeling a tightness in his chest. After a long sigh, he picks up the phone and calls Claire, a friend who has always been his support. Claire, I think I'm at my limit. Ethan, you don't have to carry this alone. I know a therapist who can help you. She works with family constellation therapy. Family what? He asks, confused and skeptical. Trust me, sometimes we carry burdens that aren't ours. You need to look at this. Ethan is silent, absorbing her words. Finally, he responds, send me her contact. The next morning, Ethan stands outside a quiet building on the Upper West Side, where Anna Lewis, the therapist Claire recommended, has her office. He stares at the closed door, hesitating as the cold wind blows around him. After a few seconds, he takes a deep breath and walks inside. Maybe it's time to try something different. A cold and sunny morning on the Upper West Side of New York City. Anna Lewis's office is in a quiet, unassuming building with large windows that allow the soft winter light to stream in. The room feels cozy. Bookshelves filled with books, green plants adding warmth, and an inviting atmosphere that contrasts with the frenzied pace of the city outside. Ethan arrives holding a cup of still hot coffee. He hesitates at the door, as if the weight of his decision is holding him back. After a deep breath, he steps inside. Anna, a woman in her 40s with brown hair pulled into a loose bun and a serene expression, greets him with a gentle smile. Ethan, welcome. He offers a shy smile and shakes her hand. Thank you for seeing me. Claire spoke very highly of you. Claire is an incredible person, Anna replies. Please have a seat. Ethan settles into a comfortable armchair, glancing around the room. The soft light, the organized books, and some symbolic objects on a central table, like small wooden human figures. Your space is very calm. Anna smiles. That's the goal. Often, when our minds are chaotic, a calm space helps put things in perspective. Ethan looks away, fiddling with his coffee cup. So, what exactly is family constellation therapy? Claire mentioned it, but I didn't really get it. Anna sits across from him, her tone patient and steady. Family constellation therapy is an approach that helps identify hidden family dynamics, behavioral patterns, and emotional ties that can influence our lives without us realizing it. Ethan frowns, intrigued. What do you mean? Often we carry problems that aren't truly ours. It could be something passed down from our parents, grandparents, or even earlier generations. Patterns of abandonment, perfectionism, guilt. They repeat because they were never resolved. Ethan lowers his gaze and murmurs, like my father? Anna notices the sensitivity and responds carefully. Maybe, but we're not here to point fingers, Ethan. We're here to see what happened and find a path toward healing. He takes a deep breath, reflecting. Okay, so how does it work? Anna stands and picks up some of the small wooden figures on the table. You'll tell me a little about your family. Based on what you say, we'll organize these pieces in a space, like a symbolic representation. This helps us visualize the family dynamics and emotions at play. Ethan nods, still skeptical but curious. It sounds kind of strange. It might seem strange at first, but if you trust the process, you might be surprised by what you find. Ethan looks at the figures in Anna's hands and quietly says, "Okay, let's try it." Anna begins the session. "Let's start with you, Ethan. Choose one of these pieces to represent yourself and place it in the center of this space." Ethan picks up a wooden figure, hesitating for a moment, and places it in the center of the table. "Okay, that's me. Now choose a piece for your father, Robert." Ethan selects another piece, a taller, stiffer figure, and places it far from the first one. "There. My father always seemed distant, like he was in a place I could never reach." "All right. And your mother?" Ethan picks a smaller, more delicate figure and places it close to his own. "My mom is the only one who ever tried to understand me. She's the balance in all of this." Anna observes the setup and gently asks, "How do you feel looking at this image?" Ethan is silent for a moment, staring at the pieces. "It's like I'm trying to get closer to my dad, but I never can. And my mom is there, but it feels like she's also looking at him, not at me." Anna tilts her head slightly, interpreting, "It seems like you feel your mother is more concerned with maintaining her relationship with your father than with looking at you." Ethan swallows hard, as if an old truth has just surfaced. "I think so. Since I was a kid, I tried to get my dad's attention, but it was never enough. It was like I needed to be perfect for him to look at me. And that quest for perfection. Do you still feel like you carry it today?" Ethan gives a humorless smile. "All the time. I try to be better at work, in my relationship, in everything. But I always end up failing." Anna pauses before adding another piece to the setup. "Now, Ethan, I'd like you to think about your grandfather, your father's father." Ethan frowns. "I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born. What do you know about him?" "My dad rarely talked about him, but I know he was strict, controlling. My dad said nothing he did was ever good enough." Anna places the grandfather's figure behind the piece representing Robert. "What do you notice here, Ethan?" Ethan stares at the table for a long moment, absorbing something new. "It's like my dad is carrying the weight of my grandfather, and now I'm carrying the weight of my dad." Anna smiles gently. "That makes sense. Sometimes behavioral patterns and expectations are passed down through generations. Your dad tried to be perfect to please his father, and without realizing it, you're doing the same thing." Ethan feels the tears sting his eyes, but he doesn't hold them back. "I just wanted him to see me, to tell me I'm enough." Anna looks at him with compassion. "Maybe it's time for you to let go of that weight, Ethan. To understand that you don't have to carry what isn't yours." At the end of the session, Ethan leaves Anna's office with his head full of thoughts and his heart heavy. He looks up at the gray New York sky, filled with clouds, feeling like something inside him has started to shift. Could it be that my dad carries the same wounds as me? Did he somehow just want to be seen too? Ethan pulls out his phone and types a message to his father, but he doesn't send it. He simply stares at the text for a long time before putting his phone back in his pocket and walking down the street, still processing everything he had seen. After his first family constellation session with Anna, Ethan walks through the busy streets of the Upper West Side, lost in thought. The sky is heavy with clouds, and the cold winter wind cuts against his face, as if the city itself is urging him to keep going deeper. He stops at a corner cafe, sitting by a window with a cup of black coffee. Outside, the city hums. Yellow taxis rush past, people walk with shopping bags, and kids cross the street hand in hand with their parents. Everything looks so normal, yet feels so distant. How did I never see this before? Ethan wonders. Why did I always think it was just my fault? Anna's words echo in his mind. Sometimes the patterns we carry come from generations before us. They aren't truly ours. The voice of his father breaks through his thoughts. You never finish anything. You need to take life seriously. Ethan closes his eyes, the anger and exhaustion bubbling up inside him. He picks up his phone and rereads the message he drafted for his father the night before but never sent. "Dad, will you ever be able to see me for who I am?" With a sigh, he deletes the message and stares at his cooling coffee. The weight in his chest feels unbearable. His phone rings. It's Claire. "Ethan, how was it with Anna yesterday?" "It was intense," he says flatly. She moved some wooden pieces around on a table, and suddenly everything made sense. "But now I don't know what to do with it." Claire's voice is warm and steady. "That's the first step, Ethan. Sometimes just seeing what's really happening is a relief." "I don't know if it's a relief or a punch in the gut," he mutters. "I always blamed my dad. But now I see he's carrying the same weight, and that scares me." "You're not alone," Claire reassures him. "Keep going. I promise it's worth it." "Thanks, Claire," Ethan says softly. That afternoon, Ethan decides to visit his parents' house again, something he usually avoids. The quiet streets of Queens are unchanged. The worn red door of the family home feels both familiar and foreign. He steps inside without knocking, as he did when he was a child. Helen is in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove. "Ethan, I wasn't expecting you today," she says with a gentle smile. "Are you staying for dinner?" "No, Mom. I just came to grab some things," he lies, avoiding her gaze. Helen studies him carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Ethan replies quickly, already heading upstairs to his old room. The room feels frozen in time. Posters of old bands still cling to the walls, dusty trophies line the shelves, and books from his school years sit untouched. He opens a drawer and finds something unexpected: an old photo album. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he flips through the pages. Each photo stirs distant memories: Christmas mornings, road trips, birthday parties. His father is there in most of them, always serious, always distant. Was he unhappy? Was I just another burden to him? Near the back of the album, Ethan finds a black and white photo of his father as a young man, standing next to an older man with a stern expression, Ethan's grandfather. On the back of the photo, in faded handwriting, it reads, "Robert and Dad, 1973. Ethan stares at the image for a long time. "My father never talks about him. Is that why? Does he still carry this with him?" When Ethan comes back downstairs, Robert is sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. The sound of the television hums faintly in the background. Ethan hesitates for a moment, then decides to speak. "Dad, why don't you ever talk about your father?" Robert lowers the newspaper, surprised. "My father? Why do you ask?" "I found this," Ethan says, handing him the old photo. "You never told me what he was like." Robert takes the photo and looks at it for a moment. Ethan watches closely, noticing the flicker of something, vulnerability, in his father's expression. "He was a hard man," Robert finally says, his voice quieter than usual. "He demanded a lot. He thought showing affection was a weakness." Ethan sits down across from him, his heart pounding. "And that's what you learned, isn't it? That's why you could never really see me or tell me I was enough." Robert looks at Ethan, and for the first time, the wall between them begins to crack. "I did the best I could." Ethan's voice trembles, emotions rising to the surface. "The best you could? All I ever wanted was for you to accept me. I spent my whole life trying to prove I'm good enough, but it was never enough for you." Robert breathes deeply, his hands gripping the photo tightly. For a moment, the silence feels endless. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he says, "I didn't know how to be different, Ethan." Ethan freezes. Those simple words hit him harder than anything else. "I didn't know how to be different," Robert repeats. "My father never showed me how. I just repeated what I knew." For the first time, Ethan sees his father not as the critical, distant man who haunted him, but as someone who was broken himself, someone who carried his own unspoken pain. Maybe it's time for you to learn, Ethan says softly. Robert looks up, eyes moist, but says nothing. Ethan takes the photo back, stands, and heads for the door. I'm trying to change, Dad. You should try too. Outside, the cold air greets Ethan like a fresh start. He breathes in deeply, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He didn't know. He never knew. But that doesn't mean I have to be like him. That night, Ethan calls Anna and schedules his next session. I think I'm starting to understand, he says. That's a good start, Ethan, Anna replies gently. Are you ready to look even deeper? Ethan smiles faintly as he looks out over the glowing New York skyline. Yes, I'm ready. It's a cold, sunny morning in New York City. Ethan walks through the streets of the Upper West Side, heading toward Anna Lewis's office. The icy wind bites at his face, but this time he feels different. Unlike his first session, when he was skeptical and uneasy, today he carries a sense of curiosity and a genuine desire to understand more about himself. I need to look at this. I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to carry this weight forever. Anna is waiting for him, sitting calmly in her armchair. The room feels even more peaceful than the last time. The soft light from the window illuminating the small wooden figures on the central table. Good morning, Ethan. She greets him warmly as he sits. How have you been since our last session? Ethan gives a small, hesitant smile, pulling off his coat and setting it aside. It's been intense, he admits. I went back to my parents' house. I found some old photos, and I think I started to understand what you meant about carrying burdens that aren't ours. Anna watches him attentively as he continues. For the first time, I saw my dad as a broken man. He didn't know how to be different because his own father was just as hard on him. Sad, you know. Anna nods, her tone serene. Understanding the pain of others can be liberating, Ethan. But what matters now is what you choose to do with that understanding. Are you ready to continue? Ethan takes a deep breath and nods. Yes, let's do it. Anna gestures toward the small wooden figures on the table. Today I want us to go deeper. I want you to think not just about your father and your family, but about how these dynamics have shaped your choices, your relationships, your work, and the way you see yourself. Ethan frowns slightly, intrigued. My choices? Yes, Anna replies. Sometimes the things we live through as children create unconscious patterns. We recreate what we know, even when it hurts us. She places the figure that represents Ethan back in the center of the table. This is still you, Ethan. Now choose a piece to represent someone important in your life today. Ethan pauses, thinking carefully, before picking a figure and placing it next to his own. Rachel. My girlfriend. Anna nods gently. And how do you feel in that relationship? Ethan stares at the pieces for a moment, biting his lip. I love Rachel, but I feel like she's tired of me. She keeps saying that I don't change, that I'm a mess. And she's not wrong. So you feel like she's pulling away? Yeah, Ethan says quietly. I think she's going to give up on me, just like my dad did. Anna picks up another piece and places it farther away from Ethan, a representation of his father, Robert. What do you see, Ethan? Ethan stares at the pieces on the table, confusion slowly turning to realization. It's like I'm putting Rachel in my dad's place. Deep down, I'm waiting for her to abandon me too. Anna gives a small knowing smile. That's right. Sometimes we look for the familiar, even when it hurts us. Without realizing it, we recreate the past. Ethan's voice trembles as he speaks. So that's why I act this way? That's why I can't organize my life, keep a relationship, or hold down a job. Because deep down, I think I'm a failure, just like my dad always said. Anna's voice is gentle yet firm. When a child hears they're not enough, they carry that belief into adulthood. But Ethan, you're not a child anymore. You have the power to see this, to let it go, and to act differently. She rearranges the pieces on the table, placing Robert's figure behind Ethan's. symbolizing the lineage of family patterns. I want you to imagine your father standing behind you, Ethan, not as the man who judged you, but as the son of a man who was equally harsh. Say this to him in your mind: Dad, I see you. I see the pain and the story you carry, but it ends here. I choose to leave this weight with you and to move forward in my own way. Ethan's throat tightens. He swallows hard, tears already forming. Slowly, in a trembling voice, he whispers, Dad, I see you. I see the pain and the story you carry, but it ends here. I choose to leave this weight with you and move forward in my own way. The tears flow freely now, but Ethan doesn't try to stop them. Anna gives him space to process the moment. How do you feel, Ethan? She asks gently. Ethan wipes his face with his sleeve and takes a shaky breath. Strange, but lighter. Like I can breathe for the first time in a long time. Anna smiles warmly. This is just the beginning, Ethan. You're starting to let go of something you've carried for years. Each time you recognize it and act differently, you're breaking the pattern. Ethan nods, exhausted but relieved. Thank you, Anna. As he steps out of the office, the cold air feels softer on his face. He looks up at the clear blue sky above the buildings and thinks about what Anna said. I don't have to carry this anymore. I'm not my father. I'm not my grandfather. I can choose to be different. On his way home, Ethan sends a message to Rachel. We need to talk. I want to change for real. For me, for you, for us. He presses send and smiles faintly, knowing this is just the beginning. Maybe I don't need to be perfect. Maybe I just need to be myself. Night falls over Brooklyn, and the city glows with the lights of buildings and the headlights of cars moving through crowded streets. Ethan's apartment looks a little different, still far from perfect, but there are signs of change. The dishes are washed, the bed is made, and the stack of bills sits neatly in a pile on the table. Small victories, small steps forward. Ethan paces nervously, his phone in hand. Hours earlier, he sent Rachel a message. We need to talk. I want to change for real. For me, for you, for us. Now his phone buzzes with her reply. Okay, I'm on my way. When he hears the knock on the door, Ethan takes a deep breath, his heart pounding. He opens it to find Rachel standing there, removing her heavy winter coat. She looks tired, her hair tied in a loose, messy bun, but her expression is kind. Hey, Ethan. Hey, come in, he says, stepping aside and trying to sound calm. Rachel looks around the apartment, noting the small changes. You cleaned up a little, she says, her voice neutral but surprised. Yeah, I'm trying. Ethan gives a shy smile, as if apologizing silently. They sit on the couch, and a heavy silence settles between them. Rachel is the first to speak. So, you said you wanted to talk? Ethan rubs his hands together nervously, trying to gather his thoughts. Yeah, look, I know I've been a mess. I forget things, I break promises, and somehow I drag you into all of this. Rachel watches him carefully, waiting for him to continue. I started therapy, Ethan says finally, with someone named Anna. She's helping me look at everything. My family, my patterns, all the stuff I never understood before. Rachel raises an eyebrow. Therapy? Yeah, it's called family constellation therapy. It's hard to explain, but it's making me see things differently. Like how I've been carrying my dad's words my whole life. I spent years trying to prove I was good enough, but I realize now that I was setting myself up to fail. Rachel's expression softens. And why now, Ethan? What's changed? Ethan takes a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Because I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to be stuck like my dad was, so afraid of being vulnerable that he shut everyone out. I'm tired of carrying this weight. I want to change for real. Rachel exhales slowly, absorbing his words. I never wanted to give up on you, Ethan, she says softly. But it's hard being with someone who doesn't believe in himself. I couldn't keep doing this alone. Ethan looks her in the eyes, tears threatening to surface. I know, and I'm sorry for putting you through that. I can't promise it's going to be easy or that I'll get everything right overnight, but I'm trying, and I hope you'll give me the chance to prove it to you. Rachel studies him for a long moment before smiling faintly, a flicker of hope in her eyes. One step at a time, okay? Ethan smiles back, his voice filled with gratitude. One step at a time. That night, as Rachel leaves, Ethan feels a mix of relief and determination. It's not a perfect resolution, but it's a start. The morning comes early, and for the first time in years, Ethan doesn't hit snooze. He gets out of bed, showers, and makes a simple breakfast. The clock reads 7:30 a.m., early for him. He catches the subway to work, standing quietly among the crowd, staring at his reflection in the window. The face looking back at him is the same, the messy hair, the tired eyes, but something feels different. There's a spark of determination he hasn't seen in years. I don't need to be perfect, he tells himself, but I can be better. One step at a time. At the office, Ethan arrives earlier than usual. Mr. Collins, his boss, raises an eyebrow as he passes his desk. You're here early, Parker. Good. Ethan smiles faintly, sitting down and opening his laptop. Today, he doesn't feel the usual weight of dread. Instead, there's a quiet sense of control. By the end of the day, he sends Rachel a quick text. Made it through the day. Feeling proud of myself for once. Her reply is almost immediate. I'm proud of you too, Ethan. In his apartment, Ethan opens the journal Anna suggested he keep. He flips to the next empty page and begins writing. I'm not my father. I'm not my grandfather. I am Ethan Parker, and I'm learning to be myself. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. And that's enough. He closes the journal, smiles softly to himself, and stares out the window. The city lights twinkle in the darkness, and for the first time in years, he doesn't feel so alone. The morning fog lingers over New York City, softening the harsh lines of the skyscrapers. Ethan sits at his small kitchen table, staring at the cup of coffee in his hands. It's quiet. Not the chaotic quiet he used to hate, but a calmer, more intentional stillness. He flips open his journal, rereading the line he wrote the night before. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to keep moving forward. His phone buzzes with a message from Mr. Collins. Ethan, I need you in my office first thing this morning. There's something important we need to discuss. Ethan stares at the screen, the familiar cold knot of anxiety curling in his stomach. What did I screw up now? The old voice in his head whispers. But he closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and pushes that thought aside. One step at a time, he mutters to himself. At the office, Mr. Collins gestures for Ethan to sit across from him. Ethan, I'll be blunt, Mr. Collins begins, his tone as sharp as ever. We have a major presentation for a big client tomorrow. I want you to lead it. Ethan blinks, stunned. Oh, me? Let it. Mr. Collins nods, his expression unreadable. You've been showing progress lately. I want to see if you can handle the pressure. Don't let me regret this. Ethan's heart races as he nods. Understood. I won't let you down. As he leaves the office, Ethan feels the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders. The familiar voice creeps in again. You can't do this. You'll mess it up just like always. But he clenches his fists, grounding himself. No, that's not my voice. That's his. He repeats Anna's words in his mind. You are not your father. You don't need to carry his story. Ethan spends the entire day working on the presentation. His desk is covered with notes, printouts, and empty coffee cups. By 7 p.m., the office is almost empty, and exhaustion weighs on him. At one point, he notices a mistake in the slides. Panic surges in his chest. What if I ruin this? What if they see I'm not good enough? He stands, pacing back and forth, hands in his hair. But then he stops and takes a deep breath. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to give my best. He corrects the mistake, closes his laptop, and sends the final version to Mr. Collins. Before leaving, he sends Rachel a text. The big presentation is tomorrow. I'm scared, but I'm ready. She replies almost immediately. You've got this, Ethan. I believe in you. The next morning, Ethan arrives at the office early. He's dressed in a simple suit, and though his hands shake slightly, there's a quiet confidence in his movements. As the clock nears 10 a.m., he stands in the conference room, ready. The clients file in, and Mr. Collins gives him a quick nod. Your show, Parker. Ethan takes a deep breath and begins. At first, his voice trembles, but as he gets into the flow of the presentation, something shifts. He focuses on the work, not on proving himself. He trusts what he knows, trusts his preparation. When it's over, there's a brief silence. Then the client smiles. This is excellent. Far beyond what we expected. Mr. Collins claps a hand on Ethan's shoulder as they leave. Good work, Parker. Keep this up. Ethan exhales slowly, feeling a weight lift off his chest. I did it. I didn't need to be perfect, I just needed to try. Later that day, Ethan sits across from Anna, his expression a mix of exhaustion and pride. I led a big presentation today, he tells her. And it went well. I didn't panic. I didn't fall apart. I just focused on what I could control. Anna smiles warmly. That's a big step, Ethan. You broke a pattern today. I think I'm starting to see it, Ethan says, his voice quiet but sure. For years, I thought I had to be perfect for my dad to see me. And when I failed, I gave up on myself. But I don't have to do that anymore, do I? Anna shakes her head gently. No, you don't. You're learning to live for yourself now, Ethan. Not for him. Ethan nods, taking in her words. I'm not done yet. But I'm moving forward. And for now, that's enough. Anna smiles. That's more than enough. Back in his apartment, Ethan looks out the window at the city below. The lights of New York stretch endlessly into the night. He feels tired, but for the first time in years, it's a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from effort, not from running away. He opens his journal and writes, I'm proud of myself today. Not because I was perfect, but because I showed up. That's enough. I am enough. As he closes the journal, his phone buzzes with a message from his dad. Your uncle told me about the presentation. Good job, Ethan. Ethan stares at the screen, his chest tight with unexpected emotion. He doesn't need his father's approval anymore, but the words still matter. He replies simply, Thanks, Dad. And for the first time in his life, he feels free. Morning sunlight spills through Ethan's window, illuminating the small changes in his apartment. A clean counter, a tidy table, and even a small green plant perched on the windowsill. Ethan sits at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as he flips through his journal. On the last page, he reads the words he wrote just the night before. I'm proud of myself today. I am enough. A notification buzzes on his phone, breaking his thoughts. It's a message from his mother, Helen. Your father wants to talk. He asked if you'd come for dinner tonight. Please think about it. Ethan sets the phone down and stares into his coffee, the familiar knot of tension building in his chest. For years, he avoided conversations with his father. They always led to the same painful place. But this time feels different. Maybe I'm ready. He picks up the phone and replies, I'll be there at 7. As Ethan drives to Queens, the streets feel smaller, the houses older. The red front door of his childhood home looks weathered but familiar. He hesitates for a moment, hand on the car door handle before stepping out. Helen opens the door with a warm smile. I'm glad you came. She hugs him briefly before ushering him inside. The smell of home-cooked food drifts through the air, bringing an unexpected wave of nostalgia. In the living room, Robert is sitting in his usual armchair, reading the newspaper. He looks up when Ethan enters. "Ethan," he says, his tone cautious but softer than usual. "Hey, Dad." For a moment, they stare at each other in silence, neither sure how to begin. Helen intervenes gently. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Why don't you two sit down and talk?" She disappears into the kitchen, leaving father and son alone. Robert gestures to the couch and Ethan sits down. Robert sets the newspaper aside, folding it carefully as if searching for the right words. "I heard about your presentation," Robert says finally. "Your uncle told me you did well." Ethan feels a flicker of surprise but keeps his voice steady. "I did. It was important to me. And I made it work." Robert nods, staring at the floor. "Good. I'm glad to hear it." Ethan studies his father carefully, noticing the stiffness in his posture, the way his hands grip the arms of the chair. For years, Ethan mistook that tension for anger, but now he wonders if it's something else, fear maybe. "Dad," Ethan says softly, "why did you want me to come here?" Robert takes a deep breath, his voice lower than before. "There's something I need to say, Ethan. I know I wasn't the father you needed." Ethan feels his chest tighten. "You were hard on me," Ethan admits, his voice trembling. "I spent my whole life trying to make you proud, but it never felt like enough." Robert looks up, his eyes finally meeting Ethan's. There's no anger, no harshness, just something vulnerable. "My father raised me to believe that showing kindness was weakness. He never praised me, never told me he was proud. I swore I'd be different, but..." He pauses, swallowing hard. "I didn't know how. I thought pushing you would make you stronger. I thought it was the only way to prepare you for the world." Ethan feels tears pricking his eyes, but he doesn't look away. "I didn't need you to push me, Dad," Ethan says quietly. "I just needed you to see me, to tell me that I was enough." Robert's gaze softens and he nods slowly. "I know that now. And I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know how to do better. But I want you to know, I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Ethan feels a weight he's carried for years begin to lift. He doesn't need these words to validate him anymore. Anna helped him understand that, but hearing them still matters. "Thank you, Dad," Ethan says softly. "That means a lot." For the first time in years, the silence between them isn't heavy. It's peaceful. After they finish dinner, Ethan and Robert sit quietly in the living room, their conversation softer, more natural. Helen smiles as she watches them, relieved to see her son and husband finally finding common ground. Before leaving, Ethan stops by the front door. "Dad," he says, turning back, "I'm trying to change. I hope you can too." Robert nods, his expression thoughtful. "One step at a time, right?" Ethan smiles faintly. "Yeah, one step at a time." Back in his Brooklyn apartment, Ethan sits on the edge of his bed, staring at the photo he took from his parents' house, the one of Robert and his father. The stern face of his grandfather now seems less intimidating, less powerful. Generations of pain, Ethan whispers to himself. But it stops here. He opens his journal and writes, "Tonight my father told me he's proud of me. For years I thought I needed those words to fix me, but now I see they were just words. The real change is happening inside me. I'm breaking the cycle. I'm learning to be enough for myself." Ethan closes the journal and exhales, feeling lighter than ever before. "I don't have to be perfect. I just have to keep showing up." He looks out at the city, its lights stretching endlessly into the dark, and smiles to himself. It's a sunny Sunday in New York City, a rare sight during the harsh winter. The sky is clear, and the streets of Brooklyn are full of life. People stroll along the sidewalks, families relax in the park, and children play in the crisp, chilly air. Ethan sits in a cozy cafe near his apartment, a new notebook open in front of him. It's not the journal he started at Anna's suggestion, but a fresh, blank notebook, a symbol of a new beginning. He holds a pen in his hand, staring at the empty page, reflecting on everything that has happened. For the first time, I feel like I have space, a place to just be myself. As he sips his coffee, his mind travels over the past months, the confusion and pain that led him to Anna's office for the first time, the revelations of family constellation therapy, where he saw the generational burdens he carried and finally let them go, the emotional conversation with his father, Robert, which opened a door to understanding and reconciliation he never thought possible, the victory at work, where he chose to act differently and prove to himself that he didn't need to be perfect to succeed, the unwavering support of Rachel, who stood by him as he learned to see himself with more compassion. Ethan smiles to himself, warmth filling his chest. For the first time, he doesn't see his life as a series of failures, but as a journey of learning and growth. That afternoon, Ethan has his last session with Anna. As he steps into the familiar, serene office, it feels different this time. The room is the same, the soft light, the bookshelves, the plants, but the heaviness he used to carry is gone. "Welcome, Ethan," Anna says with a warm smile. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan sits down, his voice steady and confident. "Light," he says simply. "For the first time in a long time, I feel light." Anna nods, satisfied. "Tell me what's changed." Ethan glances at the small wooden figures still on the table, the same ones that once revealed so much to him. He smiles. "I started to see that I'm not my father, and I'm not my grandfather. I spent my life trying to prove my worth, carrying weight that wasn't mine. But when I gave that weight back, something shifted." "And how do you see yourself now?" Anna asks gently. Ethan pauses, choosing his words carefully. "I see that I'm enough even with my flaws. I still have a long way to go, but I believe I can change. And I don't have to be perfect to be loved." Anna smiles, her eyes kind. "That's a powerful realization, Ethan. Family constellation therapy doesn't erase the past, but it helps us see it differently. Healing comes when we accept our story and choose something new." Ethan nods, emotion softening his expression. "Thank you, Anna, for everything." Anna shakes her head. "The work was yours, Ethan. I just showed you the path. You walked it." The following weekend, Ethan invites Robert, Helen, and Rachel to his apartment for lunch. The table is set simply but thoughtfully. The space is clean, calm, and inviting. For the first time, Ethan feels proud to welcome the people he loves into his home. Robert looks around the apartment, impressed. "You've cleaned up well. Looks good." "Thanks, Dad," Ethan says with a smile. The meal is simple, but the conversation flows easily. There are no criticisms, no unspoken tensions. They talk about work, about plans for the future, about small everyday things. Helen beams as she watches her husband and son talk, truly talk, for the first time in years. "It's nice to see you two like this," she says softly. Robert turns to Ethan, his expression softer than usual. "I'm learning from you, son," he admits. "It's possible to change even after all this time." Ethan smiles, his voice calm and sure. "We're learning together." Rachel squeezes Ethan's hand under the table, a quiet sign of support. He squeezes back, grateful for her presence and her patience. He no longer feels alone on his journey. That evening, Ethan sits by the window of his apartment with his new notebook open. Outside, the New York skyline glows in the soft light of dusk. On the first page of the notebook, he writes, "Life doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. Today I choose to be myself, to leave the past where it belongs and build, one day at a time, the future I want to live. I am enough. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." Ethan sets the pen down and leans back, looking out at the city. For the first time in years, he doesn't feel afraid of what lies ahead. He closes the notebook, takes a deep breath, and whispers to himself, "Thank you." Sometimes we have to go back to the past to free ourselves from it. When we understand the stories that brought us here, we find the strength to write the next chapters. The weight doesn't disappear, but we learn to carry it differently. Ethan isn't perfect, and he never will be. But now he knows he doesn't have to be. He is enough. And that's all that matters.